What's up, guys? Welcome to Podcast 412, Fight for Purity. A bold way of looking at challenges that young people are facing. We'll talk about the naked truth of life and how to handle the problems you're thinking but not talking about. So strap in, get ready for another great podcast.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. So we're going to pretty much kind of conclude our session on purity, and then we're going to continue. The way we wanted to kind of end it was to kind of recap on some of the things that we talked about. And we talked about a lot of things, so we're just going to hopefully do a quick recap on everything. The way that we started this podcast was on 1 Timothy 4:12?
Yeah.
Okay. Or was it 2 Timothy 4:12? 1 Timothy. Okay. And so one of the points that we made was just about how we see youth, you know, like not looking down on youth, not because I feel like youth don't really know kind of where they fit in today, you know, because there's so many voices calling out to you. There's so many things, you know, social media, we talked about music, we talked about like friends, you know, there's so many things that can influence you, you know, and so many things that do influence you, you know, whether, like I said, whether it's music, where you go to school, where you live, you know, your friends, your family, like you just have so many things that just, like I said, voices kind of speaking to you and just coming from every direction. So we wanted to kind of focus in on just the importance of who you are as a young person, and that you can have an influence on the things that come into your life, the things that you allow into your life. And I know one of the first things we kind of talked about was we were trying to define like what purity was, and we went into different things. So do you guys remember any things that maybe come to mind about what that meant, what purity meant, or where it came from, or?
Well, I know it. One of the things that we talked about was how, like, when you purify water, you know, you take all the bad stuff out. And I know one of the definitions was definition, because I remember when you explained it to me, I was like, what? So how's the definition? But it just means that it has like defined lines.
Yeah.
And I know one of the biggest things we talked about, kind of what we stuck with, was a filter.
Yeah.
Purity is a filter. Just like with water, you're filtering things in and out of your life. You're either taking them in or you're taking them out. It's one of those things. I remember that from what we thought purity meant.
Yeah. And then one of the things that too I've said a couple times is that what we want you guys to see is that we're not just talking about like what we think or our opinions, you know, we're actually trying to give you guys things that are actually things that are like valid, things that are true, you know. When we talk about boundaries or purity, we're not just giving you what we think, you know. We actually went through definitions, and we've tried to kind of go through that, you know, and explain like what boundaries were. We talked about laws, you know, physical laws, you know. Physical laws are out there, you know. They're not made up things, you know. We're not making up, you know, gravity, or we're not making up, you know, certain things, you know. And it's the same thing, you know, with you, with purity, and you setting boundaries for yourself, you know. It's kind of a rule of life, you know. Boundaries, like I said, they're everywhere that you look, you're going to see boundaries. So the one thing that I wanted to make sure is that people understood that we're not just talking, you know, and just giving you what we think or what we feel, or, you know, but it's actually things that actually work, and things that are out there, things that are needed, you know. And if we need them out in society, then you need them for yourself as well, because then you're going to have things that are going to, like you said, try to influence you, you know, people that are going to push, you know, the limits with you, whether that was, you know, we talked about emotions, like in your emotions. We talked about boundaries in your emotions, in your friends, the kind of friends that you had. And I also, like, where does it begin, you know, like who's the biggest influencer? Like, who was your biggest influence for you guys?
Yeah.
Your parents, I would say.
Yeah. Like, I don't know. No.
Whoever raised you.
Yeah, pretty much. Well, like, that was, I guess that's the first influence you get as a kid, is your parents, or whoever you're living with, whoever you're growing up with. But not even that. It's because, like, when we're for majority of our lives when we're young. We're in school 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, you know? So like your friends and who you hang out with at school is a big influence too. And that's why we talked about, I remember, boundaries with your friends, because well, you gotta be careful, you know, like there's that saying, like, you are who you hang out with, and that's so true.
Birds of a feather flock together.
Exactly. You know, just because like even in your friend groups, there's always that like that person that's kind of like the leader-ish of the friend group, not like officially, you know, they're not going to be like, I'm the leader, you know, but but it's the person everybody listens to, you know, it's the person who goes out and says, hey, let's go do this, and then they like kind of set it up and everyone's like, yeah. And you know, it's good or bad, because sometimes you get the friends who are like, let's just all go like to the park, and like, yeah, and then you got those crazy people and they're like, let's all go get drunk, you know. So that's why it's important, like, to have boundaries in your friends, and that's what we talked about too, I remember.
Well, sorry. Well, I was just thinking, like, even with the choices that we make, you know, regarding like purity or just in everyday life, like a lot of these choices that we make as teenagers, it impacts us even through our adult life. You know, like there's stuff that we're gonna take into even when we're older, regarding, I guess, just with all the stuff that we choose to infiltrate our life.
Yeah, and I guess that goes back to what you were saying about when we first started with, you know, the youth, and we were messing around. We're basically saying being young is basically a force to be reckoned with, and you know, because you are a force with, and you do have an influence on others, and I don't think when you're younger, you don't realize that. You just think you're just living life, you know. I'm just going to school, I'm just hanging out with my friends, and that's it. But you are, whether you like it or not, you're influencing people. People are watching you. People are, you know, listening to you. You know, they watch what you do. Even if you are freaking 12, you know, people do.
Someone's watching you.
And someone's looking at you, and someone, you know, like, because I have nieces and nephews, and I don't even have to like necessarily do anything, but they want to like be around me, but that's the same thing as, like, I don't know what it is about being young. It's the same as like life, so people want to be around that.
Because it makes you feel lively.
Yeah, you're not all boring and old yet, you know, life hasn't beaten you down yet, you know. or the decisions from your youth haven't, you know, quite hit you in the face yet, you know.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, even like in history, everything, like all the revolutions, you know, in like civil rights and everything in politics, it's all from young people. Even like today, with all the politics and stuff going on, you don't see like really old people in the politics during debates, and like all the videos and all the influencers around now, they're not older, they're younger, they're like 30s and under, you know. And it can be like, there's that one girl, I totally forgot her name, who was like fighting for like climate change. I can't remember her name, but she was like what, 12, 13?
Oh, Greta Thunberg.
There we go. Her. I mean, she had like this big old viral outbreak on social media. She's 12, 13, you know, like you are a force to be reckoned with, and it's up to you.
If it's good or bad.
Yeah, if it's good or bad, if you're going to be a good kind of force or a bad kind of force, either for yourself or for the people around you. And that's why we've been talking about purity and boundaries, is because you are so impactful, you're so influential, that you have to pay attention to what kind of person you are. Because like when you're young, all of these choices that we're suggesting and that we're kind of throwing out there, it's because you're going to make some kind of choice either way, and those choices right now are determining what kind of adult you're going to be. And if you start screwing around and just wasting, you know, these opportunities to make choices, you're going to end up a person that you don't like, or a person that you're like, I didn't think I would be here, or this kind of place, or in this kind of person. I didn't think I'd be that kind of person, you know. And that's why it's important with boundaries. Because I remember I said it in one of the other ones, if you're not making those boundaries for yourself, someone else is going to make them for you. You know, someone else is going to be putting things into your life versus you deciding what's in your life. And
And, I'm sorry. And we're not saying that like if you do turn into somebody that you don't like, we're not saying that you're a lost cause. You are a lost cause friend. No, what we're it is possible, you know, to change, to backtrack, but you just made it so much harder for you, versus because you could have made those choices when you were 12, 13, 14, 15, all the way up to 20, 20, even 21, 22, but because you decided to, you know, not basically, now you're like in your late 20s, hitting 30s, and now it's hard, and you realize, oh my God, how the hell did I get here? And then you're trying to backtrack, but it's almost, you just make it harder for yourself. So so I just wanted to say that you're not a lost cause, okay? We'll be right back after this short break.
The culture ain't approved, so you know they had to bruise them. That's the way they do, man, they swear they so gangsta. Everyone the same, everybody do the same stuff. Tattoos, piercings, smoking up and drinking, money and sex, plus them extravagant weekends. Man, if that's the highlight, my puff past that. You live evaporated like missing the gas cap. I guess I'm past that, I'm in rebellion. I'd rather have $1 in my pocket than $1 million.
And then that's one of the things too that I have a picture of, like I said, was those boundaries. You know, boundaries are difficult. We talked about them to put up. You know, it takes a lot of work to put a boundary in. You know, and one of the things that we said was that someone's always going to try to push that down. You know, always. You know, and it's a lot easier to push it down. You know, than it is to build it up. You know, I was talking about a fence that by where I run at. That, you know, first there was one pole that was gone, or that someone had knocked down, and then later there was two, and then I'm not kidding you, probably a week ago I saw like almost a whole row, you know, and not because that boundary was bothering anybody. It wasn't in anybody's way. It wasn't affecting them in any way, but just because there it was, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna kick it down. Just because it's there, and then somebody else came and said, oh, look, I'm going to kick the other one down, you know, but that just shows you like youth, you know, because probably a young person that did that, you know, and you know, and we're, you know, but the whole point is for you to just, you know, not have to, you know, have to put those boundaries up later in your life, you know, when there's like damage that's been done. You know, we're trying to get you to think, you know, and kind of like what Sarah said, you know, you're making choices even if you think you're not. By not making a choice, you're making a choice. You know, and sometimes you don't think about it like that, but that's how it is. If you don't choose, you're choosing. By not choosing.
You're still making a choice.
Yeah, you're
whether
still
not
making a
choosing
choice.
anything.
Yeah, because when you don't choose to make boundaries, then you're choosing not to have boundaries.
Yeah,
You
because
know?
I, even as like, I still struggle with, sometimes you get in that mentality, well, I don't care. I don't care. Like, so you're like, I'm not gonna try. I don't care. I don't care. And then, but even in that in itself, you're creating a bad habit.
Well, even then, you know, because I remember when I was like that, when like things were hard, and I'm trying to put boundaries up, and it got hard, because it does get hard, either because it's hard work, you know, you have to keep saying no to people, or because somebody's trying to break down that boundary, and it gets hard. And I remember being in that I don't care mode, like, you know what, phooey on it all, you know. I don't care, phooey on it all. But then eventually that moment passes. that phase, that I don't care phase passes, and then you're left with the aftermath of I don't care. You did care, you just didn't feel like caring in that moment. And then now afterwards, for me at least personally, all the boundaries I had worked so hard to build up, gone. Like, it was totally gone, and I had to start again, and I just made it harder for myself. And then even in like I don't care mode, like you hurt so many people because you don't care, because you know, like, you know what, all I care about right now is me and my feelings. I don't care if me deciding to do nothing is going to hurt my family, if it's going to hurt my siblings, if it's going to hurt my parents, if it's going to hurt my friends. Like, I've lost and I've had broken relationships because someone in the relationship didn't care, and it was like broken, and now we're like, well, do we fix it? Is it worth it? Because we decided we didn't care, so now it's broken, and now you're left looking at it like, is it worth building back up?
Yeah.
So now you're stuck in that place, like, should I build it back up? Should I even try again? Because then I'm going to get in that mode again. I don't care. And I think that's a big thing. Like you said, it's creating bad habits, because once you decide I'm not going to try, you're going to decide that again later. And then it's just going to get worse and worse until things are totally out of your control. It's in your control now versus you deciding not to do anything, and later it's no longer in your control.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like you said, it's like that idea of, you know, you're allowing all these things that eventually you're not going to be able to control, because at first it might be controllable. At first, the decisions that you make, you might be able to handle them, but eventually, you know, the floods come. You know, the masses of people start invading your life. You know, people that you didn't ask for, people that, but because you didn't have, you know. And then one of the other things too that I kind of remember talking about is that you can either live in reality or you can live in a fantasy, you know. And the fantasy is, oh, no boundaries, just do whatever I want. You know, it's a fantasy. It's not, you can't live your life like that. Reality of realities is that, you know, life is real. Sometimes life is hard. Sometimes you have to make, you know, hard choices, you know. You can live in fantasy and think that everything's okay, and, you know, pretend you have, you know, 1,000 friends when you really don't, you know. And you can, you know, try to impress these 1,000 friends that really are not your friends. You know, they're probably, you know, what is it, AI now, you know. It's probably just
The bots.
Yeah.
The AI bots.
the pretend, you know, followers, you know. So that's something that, you know, you have to think about. And one other thing I think that we talked a little bit about was just the influence of our fathers, you know. Like, I didn't have a dad, so my dad influenced me, but not as a person, but as being an absent dad, you know. So, you know, I didn't really have boundaries in my life. And so that really influenced me, like what I thought about myself, how I carried myself, you know. I craved for affection, you know, a lot more, I'm sure, than somebody that does have a dad, you know. And I think one of the things that I think parents don't realize is how much of an influence, you know, dads really are to their kids, not just their daughters, but to their sons as well, you know, because it matters, you know. And I don't know if you guys want to share. We talked a little bit about that earlier.
Yeah, well, I know, like, for me personally, just as a girl, it made a difference having my dad around, because he was always there, you know. He wasn't like, I never wondered where he was, and just there was like a security in that, and knowing that no matter where I was in life physically or even just like mentally, I knew I could go to my dad. You know what I mean? Like, even now as an adult, you know, I know I can still rely on my father. I know that if I'm broken down, if I need a ride, if something horrible were to happen in my life, I know I could rely on my father. And there's a security in that, and knowing that I'm safe, I guess, in that sense. But even just as a kid growing up, it was the same thing. Like, my dad was there, but he also was like a support. Even because I remember in a past episode we talked about how, like, our bubbles, our personal bubbles, I said I'm super affectionate, and I get that from my dad. But even when I was like missing that or needing that, and I was like super emotional, I would go to my dad and I would hug him and I'd cry. My poor father, he had no idea what to do, because, you know, I know as fathers and as men, you're like typically not emotional, you know. So when a woman's crying on you, you're like, you know. but you know, kudos to my father, because he just held me, and that was enough. That was enough for me. He didn't say anything. He didn't try and, like, you know, comfort me. He literally just stood there and held me. Yeah. The poor old man, you know, he's probably freaking out. I don't know what his face looked like, but just letting me cry on him and holding me like that was enough for me. And that was really important to me, knowing that I could rely on him for something like that.
I'd have to say that's a big thing. When you having a father is very important. If you're a dad and you're listening, to be affectionate towards your daughter. Like, that's a very big thing. I didn't realize it because, you know,
you're in it.
Yeah, you're in it in the moment, but like looking back on it, like, that was a very big thing that was very helpful. And it's not even like, you know, constantly holding me or constantly, you know, like, you know, whatever. It's just whenever I needed a hug, he was okay with it. He didn't like push me away. He didn't like, you know, because even that just like you know, would like hurt me.
Yes.
Like if
stiffening
you ever,
up and like
stiffening up if I tried to hug you or whatever. But like physical affection is very, very, very big. And then like verbal affirmation as well. Like telling your daughter that she's pretty, you know, telling her that, just talking to her.
she's special.
That she's making
Yeah.
her feel special, making her feel and safe as well. And
Important.
like, and then
Yeah.
yes, and then also the biggest thing with my father is that, you know, I was never scared to tell my dad like when I messed up. Like I wasn't scared to do that.
Yeah.
Like I was scared in like as in disappointing and like
yeah, and being like, I'm gonna get in trouble.
yeah, and then I know like I'm gonna get in trouble like for more selfish reasons, but I wasn't scared like my dad isn't gonna love me anymore because I messed up. My dad is gonna, you know, hate me from now on because I messed up.
Yeah.
He made that a very good, open and safe environment for me to tell him when I'm messing up and when I'm doing wrong. So that's very important as a father, if you're listening, to just be there for your daughter. I can't speak for a son because I'm not a son, but
it makes a difference because just seeing like how the boys are, or my nephews, I should say, how they are with their dad, like it makes a difference. There's a huge difference. And then seeing how like my son is because his dad isn't there,
Yeah.
like it makes a huge difference.
There's more security, I think, and more protection. So, and I think that, you know, and I think we could actually come back to this. We'll probably have to do another little session, a part 2. But we wanted to just really point that out, is that fathers, man, you're important more than what you know. You know, I know what it's like to not grow up with a dad, and so my experience is like totally different. I'm a different person because I didn't have a dad. You know, and you can survive, obviously. You know, I didn't die not having one. You know, I made it through, you know, but with way more struggles, you know, way more insecurities, very insecure, you know, so. But we're going to probably have to end it at that, and then we'll come back and do our part 2, and hopefully you come back and join us and comment, you know, whether this has been helpful for you guys, and, you know, we'd like to hear from you, so.
Like and subscribe.
Yes. So we'll see you guys. Yeah. So we'll see you guys again. Bye.
thanks for listening. Join us for our next podcast. You can contact us through Instagram at podcast412 or email us at 412fight@gmail.com. See you next time.